Yeah, I think the chair is advancing social change insofar as research and academic work can contribute to the process. For example, one of the things we're trying to do is to focus on agents and processes which lead to social change. For example, the study on protests, the study on strike committees. We're looking at where the change is originating, where it's happening, who are the people who are leading it, and how far does it take society.
I think this chair is about social change because it doesn't solely look at a certain discipline like sociology as its own, but it includes, as Randall said, something like history and how we have come, like as South Africans, from historically being in this apartheid era and how things have transformed. And the fact that it doesn't look solely on things like protest or your politics, but it looks at South Africa economically. It includes researchers such as film and how film can advance social change. So it's looking at different aspects in society and not solely on a certain aspect of society.
Like other people have said, the chair is doing a good job recording histories, looking at how agents are changing society. But usually in academia, there's always this disconnect between what's written about and what people are actually doing to make social change. So on the one hand, we are advancing social change, like we're providing something useful to society. But on the other hand, I think it's safe to say the chair is doing much more limited activity on the ground with people who are making social change.
The chair advancing social change. Yes, I think it does advance social change. Mainly because of the information that's provided here. I mean, from the period that I've been here, I've learned to understand things better. I've learned to understand the dynamics of protests, and the dynamics of, women's studies, gender issues, racial issues in the country. And if all people in South Africa had the chance to actually view the information and the research that's been done here, I think they'll be able to understand, to comprehend their social circumstances, and therefore find a way of actually changing them from their own agency.
I think social change is not only about what happens outside of this room and outside of the academy. I think it's also about what happens within the academy. And I think that's where the role of the chair can play an interesting role. I think one of the strengths of the chair is that it brings in a range of different students from different disciplinary backgrounds. We have sociology, we have history, we have philosophy, and we give them hands-on practical experience of research. They go out into the field and do field work, which broadens their experiences and their abilities as new young researchers. And I think that's important in terms of thinking about transformation within the academy.
I wanted just to pick up from what Karen said about changes in discourses, because the first question when we were answering, people were talking either about the macro structural changes or some changes at the individual level, but there are also some changes in the way we talk about certain issues and the way we understand them. And we as academics or scholars can contribute to changing the ways we talk about particular issues. And that's also part of social change, and it's interlinked with the structural changes as well.
Look, we're being asked here to consider whether or not this unit has any real impact on social change. And the danger is that we think up examples of how we can make a difference. And I don't think academics make any difference at all, really, to the way in which society develops. What we can do is to make sense of it. We can influence a few people, but really we have very little effect on things. Occasionally, people take a bit of notice, and the only time that's ever happened in my life is when we did some work around Maracana, and a couple of field workers and I discovered where people had been killed, and it was really dramatic, and it got into a lot of newspapers, and I think it also helped us to have sufficient prominence to start talking about a massacre and to shift the discourse over whether this was a tragedy, which is what the government like to call it, or whether this was an occasion where the police have killed 34 people, which clearly it was. It was a massacre, and I think that to some degree we may have had a little bit of impact on the way people see it.
Yeah, no, Peter, you've got a point, but I think that we shouldn't underplay also the way in which the chair allows what Luke calls scholar activists, you know, to have a base, because some of us are active in social movements and we get affirmed and get, you know, information, share ideas. So I think the chair's openness to practical political activism, I think, is also a good thing. Obviously, it depends, you know, how far that political activism is effective. But certainly, I think this space is probably unique in the university in terms of encouraging and allowing that.
I agree with what Trevor's saying, and I think it relates in a way to something which we ought to recognise about the kind of social science that we do, that it's objective, but it's not neutral. You know, we're on the side of people, we're on the side of the poor, we're on the side of people who are fighting back at Marikana and elsewhere. And that has implications for the research that we do. I mean, so for instance, it was possible at Marikana to get some very good interviews because it made it clear that we were on the side of the people who'd been attacked by the police. Unless we'd sympathised, we wouldn't have had people talking to us, and we wouldn't have been able to get such good information in the interviews. So we're not neutral, and I think that affects the atmosphere that we have within the unit. I mean, people can have all sorts of different opinions and share them and argue with each other, but there are limitations. You know, any racist comment and there's the door. Anybody is homophobic, we don't want you. You're going to have to leave, because unless you have certain parameters around the kind of discussions that you're going to have, it's impossible to have an open, an interesting discussion about how we change society.